So our next speaker is Menasche. She's from the USA. She's a civil rights lawyer, radical feminist, lesbian and socialist, and founding member and coordinator of Feminists in Struggle, FIST. And the title of your talk is Fighting the Witch Hunters, Update on US Wrongful Termination Lawsuit. So thank you so much for coming.
So some of you might have seen my original talk about what happened to me and putting it in historical context. This is part two. Basically, it's the conspiracy exposed, and it's an update of what's going on with my lawsuit. On May 11th, 2022, it's almost 2 years ago, I was fired without warning from a job that I'd had for almost 20 years as a civil rights attorney at Disability Rights California. And my crime was declaring that abortion bans harm women as a sex. I was also targeted for my outside political feminist activity with Feminist in Struggle, and also my involvement in the Green Party's battle to defend the Georgia Green Party for fighting for sex-based rights. And also, it turns out, and I wasn't as clear about this in the beginning, I suspected, but I wasn't clear about it. It turns out for me being an out lesbian. It turned out to be the old homophobia in a new shiny bottle of trans activism. For women who were not present at my first presentation, let me just quote really briefly the statement I made that triggered this attack on me and my firing a few days later. What happened was the executive director issued a statement supporting abortion rights. It was right before the Dobbs decision was released, and welcomed feedback from staff. So I took him up on his offer, and I said, oh, well, let me say, first of all, the statement, it excluded women. It said every other group that could possibly be affected by abortion, except women. So I responded by saying, so glad DRC, it's Disability Rights California, came up with a statement in defense of Roe. Thank you. Access to safe legal abortion is a life and death necessity for women as a biological sex across the board, regardless of race, economic class, gender identity, sexual orientation, even lesbians can be raped, or anything else, and an absolute prerequisite for equal female participation in our society. And then all hell broke loose. I was fired a few days later. On January 26, 2023, I filed a lawsuit for wrongful termination alleging sex and sexual orientation discrimination and retaliation. Just recently, the lawsuit was amended to add a claim for discrimination on the basis of political activity. California is really lucky, or California residents, workers are lucky, because we have a provision in our labor code that says that employers are not supposed to interfere with the outside political activity of their employees. And they were definitely investigating me and doing just that. Trial in the case is now scheduled for October 25th, 2024 in the San Diego Superior Court. So we've been through many months of discovery. We're still in the process of discovery right now. And through that discovery, I learned a lot more about what was going on behind the scenes, the concerted effort to get me fired that I could never have even imagined. And I'm not naive, but it shocked me. So this is my update that I think has ramifications, and my case has ramifications for all of us who are on the front lines of the battle for women's liberation and against all the faces of backlash and misogynist reaction. Turns out my witch hunt was built up over months or even years. It involved at least 17 people at work, 15 of whom, all middle management, signed a several-page petition over a weekend immediately following my comments on abortion. That petition was directed at the executive director and the leadership team of Disability Rights California, urging that I be fired. The apparent ringleader, or the inspirer of all this, was a young trans-identified female lawyer brought in as a fellow for a trans advocacy project who had been investigating me way before the 2022 email exchange on abortion. And it was who was particularly disturbed about my lesbianism. Yeah, I have a real strong identification with the women who were persecuted in the Salem witch hunt after this. I've been reading on it and studying it. So this is a picture about what happened to women at Salem hundreds of years ago. So the petition started by saying, we write to reject the trans antagonistic comments. I don't know if people have heard that term, but that was a new one for me. The trans antagonistic comments that Ann Menasche made over work email to the entire DRC staff on the morning of Friday, May 6, 2022. And that was referring to the statements on abortion, which I read part of it, and then I continued to say females are affected by abortion bans. And that was pretty much all I said. Quote, unfortunately, this was not an isolated incident. A pattern has now emerged in which Ann uses staff-wide communications that are directed at transgender nonconforming and non-binary members of our staff. Her statements indisputably violate DRC policy. And I was referring to their trans inclusion policy, and I'll talk about that later. Quote, to date, however, Menasche has acted with impunity. This letter seeks to change that, first and foremost for the sake of our colleagues who have been forced to suffer Menasche's abuses, but also for the sake of DRC itself. We believe Menasche's pattern of harassment is sufficiently pervasive to have created a hostile work environment, unquote. So what were my abuses? You read through the entire several-page letter, and basically there's three things. First, my statement that only females can get pregnant, only females need abortions. Shocking, right? The irony of this is beyond measure here. Similar statements as mine have been made by judges and lawyers across the country, especially now after the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade. Because the strongest argument for abortion rights post-Dobbs is sex discrimination or the equality argument. And this is especially the case if there is a state equal rights amendment. And one of these days I'll get to come here and talk about why the ERA is important. But here, I was saying the argument that is being used across the country in defense of abortion rights. And it goes farther back than that. Decades ago, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that she thought the equality argument was far better of a basis to secure abortion rights compared to the right to privacy that was a basis of the Roe decision. Most recently, there was a Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision in the case of Allegheny Reproductive Health Center versus Pennsylvania Department of Human Services. This was just in January of 2024. That said that pregnancy is a sex-based medical condition, quote unquote, from the court, and basically found that abortion, the restrictions on this case involved a ban on public funding for abortion. They discriminated on the basis of, oh, that dirty word, sex. So this is really ironic, beyond ironic, because if the Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices worked for DRC, they would likely have been fired. Okay, so this is the stuff that blew me away. They cited a statement that I had made months earlier, that basically I'm a lesbian and that I'm only interested in intimate involvements with other women. Basically, that was my statement. Months earlier, I had I had communicated my quote unquote anti-trans sentiment by responding to an email sent to all the staff regarding an intersectional resource guide from the United Nations that defined lesbians as same gender attracted persons, quote unquote, same gender. I have no idea what that would mean, really. But anyway, I responded that this definition of lesbian was quite controversial and that many lifelong lesbians, including myself, define our lesbianism as same-sex attraction that has nothing to do with gender at all. And that's all I said. But months later, the petition cited this as evidence of my trans antagonism. And cited the trans-identified ringleader, as I call her. When Menasche, and this is a quote that was quoted in the petition, but it was a quote from this person. When Menasche says her lesbian identity is rooted in same-sex attraction, she impliedly excluding transgender women and trans people broadly from her sexuality, but also from the category of woman, stating one's very specific genitalia-based orientation is inappropriate for a work setting and especially inappropriate for an all-staff email. So in a nutshell, lesbians are obscene, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I've been doing lots of reading after all this happened. I read about Salem witch trials. I also got my hands on this incredible book called that talks about the story of Eve Adams, who was a lesbian leftist activist, an immigrant who lived in the United States of some period of time, was basically persecuted and prosecuted by the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover himself, because of her left-wing political activities. She knew Emma Goldman, and she was selling left-wing publications around the country. And then basically they set someone up to kind of try to date her. And the only thing what they got that they used to prosecute her was a little book she wrote that she just distributed to her friends, and she ended up giving a copy to the FBI agent, which was a little lesbian stories, really sweet little love stories. Because of that book, she was accused of obscenity, prosecuted, imprisoned, and then deported. And then she died in the Holocaust. She's a Jewish refugee. So anyway, here we are 100 years later, and lesbians are obscene. The witch hunters wrote the executive director that my statement should be considered in the context of my horrid anti-trans statements made outside of work related to my participation in FIST and in the Green Party. They quoted me from a FIST YouTube video where I said that I thought women had two enemies, trans activism and the Christian right. And also from an internal Green Party document defending the Georgia Party from expulsion for its gender critical views. And that the statement they quoted was, persons born female escaping from male violence should not be forced to share intimate spaces and shower facilities with people with penises. That was my quote. Oops. Under California law, employers are not supposed to interfere with employees outside political activity. That's a violation of the labor code. This petition went to the executive director and the manager of our litigation unit. It was considered, admittedly, by the head of the litigation unit, that petition was considered in the decision to fire me. So we added that to our complaint. So there were several depositions taken of the top management at Disability Rights California. And they basically accused me of knowingly violating the trans inclusion policy. And there was two parts of the policy they said I violated. One is just general prohibition on harassment. They basically referencing biological sex was harassment under this view. And then I was also accused of violating the policy on pronoun use, even though there was no pronouns involved. There were zero pronouns. It was just nouns and adjectives. That was it. And the executive director basically said the what I had said that was a problematic, and the assistant, the person who was right under them, who heads up litigation. My bad words were, quote, woman as a biological sex. That was a bad word. That's the phrase that was the bad word. And my lawyer pointed out that I included trans men, quote unquote, because I said regardless of gender identity. So they were certainly included, but they didn't want to be included as females. And then, of course, I excluded trans women because we know how frequently they get pregnant. Anyway, it was a pretty amazing these were very interesting and amazing depositions. But it was those words, now women and female and biological, that were the hate words according to GRC management. It was virtually never okay to specify sex because that was exclusionary and we needed to be inclusive. And that meant, when you think about it, there's no way you could ever fight sex discrimination if you thought you were of any kind. If you thought you were being paid less or denied a promotion versus your male co-workers, you wouldn't really be able to talk about it because you couldn't say sex. You couldn't say, well, I'm being discriminated against as a woman. You couldn't say that because those are all prohibited. This is how far this insanity has gone. So witch hunts only end when enough people speak out and say enough is enough. That's true with the McCarthy era. That's true with the Salem witch trials. It's true across the board. And that's what we need to do, is we need to start speaking up and fighting back. So I'm asking for political support here from all my sisters and men who are allies of feminism to sign the statement of solidarity that's on the defendfeminist.net website. We're also seeking organizational endorsements and to stay on top of developments. And I have to update the site still, but we'll be adding the new complaint, a little more information. But the defendfeminist.net has information about this. And Feminist and Struggle website often carries updates as well. And I will be speaking at our conference that's coming up July 5th to 7th in the San Diego area on a panel with Thistle Peterson and some other people, other women, to speak about the witch hunts and how to fight them. So we're going to actually have a panel at our conference. So I really appreciate having the opportunity to be here. Just end with my favorite quote. Remember the dignity of your womanhood. Do not appeal, do not beg, do not grovel. Take courage, join hands, stand beside us, fight with us. There's the witch. I'm the witch. Trial scheduled October 25th, 2024 in the San Diego Superior Court. Stay tuned and thank you for having me.